Chapter 10. Money and Value. Men have often dreamed of a non-monetary society as a kind of golden age to be attained someday in the future. It is important, therefore, to understand both the problems of monetary wealth as well as the advantages of money. Adam Smith gave us a vivid picture of English non-monetary society before the rise of extensive commerce and a monetary market for produce. A feudal lord having great assets in cattle and grain then used most of it and marketed a limited proportion. Smith described the situation ably. Quote, "Before the extension of commerce and manufacturers in Europe, the hospitality of the rich and the great, from the sovereign down to the smallest baron, exceeded everything which, in the present times, we can easily form a notion of. Westminster Hall was the dining room of William Rufus, and might frequently, perhaps, not be too large for his company. It was reckoned a piece of magnificence in Thomas Becket that he strawed the floor of his hall with clean hay or rushes in the season, in order that the knights and squires who could not get seats might not spoil their fine clothes when they sat down on the floor to eat their dinner. The great Earl of Warwick is said to have entertained every day at his different manors 30,000 people. And though the number here may have been exaggerated, it must, however, have been a very great number to admit of such exaggeration. A hospitality nearly of the same kind was exercised not many years ago in many different parts of the Highlands of Scotland. It seems to be common in all nations to whom commerce and manufacturers are little known. I have seen, says Dr. Pocock, an Arabian chief dine in the streets of a town where he had come to sell his cattle, and invite all passengers, even common beggars, to sit down with him and partake of his banquet." End quote. All this sounds very appealing. A bond was ostensibly established between the serfs and the lord. However, our modern industrial society created a greater and more far-reaching independence than anything feudal society knew. True, the interdependence is an impersonal and economic one, but under feudalism, as now, a personal bond between higher and lower was made possible mainly by a Christian faith, not by any personalism inherent in the social structure. Moreover, in the world in which an earl could feed 30,000 a day, any failure of crops or other diseases meant common famines. The lack of commerce and a monetary economy prevented the very ready and rapid flow of goods. Even more, production was less geared to the market and more to subsistence. When money became an easy means of storing capital and a ready measure of marketplace values, trade flourished and capitalization became easier. Money provides a ready and necessary measure of economic values. Hard money, that is, gold and silver, gave men a convenient yardstick for economic activity. Just as a level and a measuring tape are basic to building construction, so sound money is basic to economic activity and development. The problem develops when money, instead of being the measure of economic value and the means of the ready flow of economic goods, becomes itself value, not merely economic value, but absolute value. Such a view of money has been all too common in history. Nero saw money as value, and in terms of his virtue or strength, extravagance was required. Suetonius reported, quote, "He thought that there was no other way of enjoying riches and money than by riotous extravagance, declaring that only stingy and niggardly fellows kept a correct account of what they spent, while fine and genuinely magnificent gentlemen wasted and squandered." Nothing in his uncle Gaius, Caligula, so excited his envy and admiration as the fact that he had in so short a time run through the vast wealth which Tiberius had left him. Accordingly, he made presents and wasted money without stint. On Tiridates, though it would seem hardly within belief, he spent 800,000 sesterces a day, and on his departure presented him with more than 100 millions. He gave the lyre player Menecrates and the gladiator Spicius properties and residences equal of those of men who had celebrated triumphs. He enriched the money-faced usurer Paneros with estates in the country and in the city, and had him placed at dice for 400,000 sesterces a point. He fished with a golden net drawn by cords woven of purple and scarlet threads. It is said that he never made a journey with less than 1,000 carriages, his mules shod with silver and their drivers clad in wool carnasium, attended by a train of mazakes and courier with bracelets and trappings. There was nothing, however, in which he was more ruinously prodigal than in building. He made a palace extending all the way from the Palatine to the Esquiline, which at first he called the House of Passages, but when it was burned shortly after its completion and rebuilt, the Golden House. Its size and splendour will be sufficiently indicated by the following details. Its vestibule was high enough to contain a colossal statue of the Emperor at 120 feet high. So large was this house that it had triple colonnade a mile long. There was a lake in it too, like a sea surrounded with buildings to represent cities, besides tracts of country varied by tilled fields, vineyards, pastures and woods, with great numbers of wild and domestic animals. In the rest of the house, all parts were overlaid with gold and adorned with jewels and mother of pearl. These were dining rooms with fretted ceilings of ivory whose panels could turn and shower down flowers, and were fitted with pipes for sprinkling the guests with perfumes. The main banquet hall was circular and constantly revolved day and night, like the heavens. He had baths supplied with sea water and sulphur water. When the edifice was finished in this style and he dedicated it, he deigned to say nothing more in the way of approval than he was at last beginning to be housed like a human being. He also began a pool extending from Mycenium to the lake of Avernus, roofed over and enclosed in colonnades, into which he planned to turn all the hot springs in every part of Baiae. He likewise projected a canal to extend from Avernus all the way to Ostia to enable the journey to be made by ship, yet not by sea. Its length was to be 160 miles, and its breadth sufficient to allow ships with 5 banks of oars to pass each other. For the execution of these projects, he had given orders that the prisoners all over the empire should be transported to Italy, and that those who were convicted even of capital crimes should be punished in no other way than by sentence to this work. End quote. Not all who made money into value are extravagant like Nero. Some are miserly, and others are thrifty. In any case, money has become for them more than a yardstick or even a storehouse of value. It has become value itself. The result is a radical social disorientation. Men work not to produce nor to gain properties, lands, and other assets, but for money. Money then becomes a god. It becomes, quote, the mammon of unrighteousness, Luke 16:9, the god of injustice and the logical goal of unbelief, Luke 16:7 and 8, 11:13. Our Lord is plain spoken. Ye cannot serve God and mammon, Matthew 6:24. Money, thus, is very important and necessary, but to make it the source of all value is a serious error and an evil. It leads in some, such as the libertarians, to absolutizing the marketplace, to making the free market and a monetary price the criterion of value per se. But money establishes economic value only. Liberalism, by assessing life and man improperly and falsely, has contributed to the breakdown of both civilization and money. First, Darwinism and evolutionary thinking generally has reduced life to a struggle for survival and a conflict universe. The older liberalism, having a Christian hangover, held to the harmony of interests, a view untenable after evolution was accepted. Money then became a weapon in this universe of conflict, not a means for achieving economic progress and harmony. In a conflict universe, even the champions of the free market placed their emphasis on competition in a Darwinian sense. The emphasis was placed not on the harmony produced by the free market and trade, but on trade as competition in the sense of war. Hollis noted, quote, Liberal philosophy told man to devote his life to competing against his neighbours for the acquisition of material wealth. Then, very arbitrarily, it told him that in this competition he might use all means save those of physical force. But why should he stop at physical force? The only answer was that war does not pay. But unfortunately, this is by no means always true. A lot of wealth, it is true, is wasted in war. But on the other hand, in war, many people can be induced to work and to invent who would never do any such thing in peace. A lot of people lose money in war, but a lot of other people make it. It may be true that more lose than gain, but it is not possible to persuade the individual that he will not be clever enough to be one of the gainers rather than one of the losers. It is no more possible to banish war by an appeal merely to avarice than it is to banish betting by a demonstration that the bookie always wins in the end. End quote. In the 1920s, many people held and taught that another world war was impossible because it would be too devastating for men to contemplate as a possibility. Such talk was in evidence again after World War II. Second, by its departure from Christian faith, liberalism, to a degree deliberately and to a degree in spite of itself, has destroyed the long-standing supernatural foundation of value and made this world the source of value. Liberalism's hope was that man would be the source of value, but man, humanistic by nature because of the fall, wants himself and something more. That something more is easily summed up by money. Hence the demand is for irresponsible monetary wealth, and inflation meets the demand. The place of money in the realm of economics as a means of economic activity and a measure of economic values is very important. But when money becomes more than that, it is seriously misused and is also soon destroyed. Life is more than economics and much more than money. Our Lord is clear on this point. Quote, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God." Matthew 4:4.